Hey guys, TheSneakySnake here, brothers in arms, World of Warships, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Tier 8 premium British battleship HMS Vanguard. Commonly compared to her British sister at Tier 6, the Warspite, this battleship across the board has some pretty good stats, but there are a few glaring weaknesses that this ship does possess, and overall, while it is a pretty capable battleship at Tier 8, it is certainly not without its flaws, and it does require a good bit of game knowledge and skill to be able to consistently produce good results. So we're going to go right into the statistics with the survivability, 71,700, which is top dog at Tier 8. And she also has some pretty decent armor, 64 millimeters on a little stretch that goes up to the bow, so you can tank shells, even Yamato shells off of that. You also have 356 millimeters of belt armor. However, the ship does have an above-water citadel, kind of from the bygone era of World of Warships, and unfortunately, it does not protect you very well when you go full broadside, and you will eat citadels with this battleship, much like a North Cal or a Yamato would. Looking at the main battery, you do have 8 381 millimeter guns with 2 turrets at the front and rear with 2 guns apiece. They do have a nice 25-second reload and a range of 20 kilometers. The AP shell velocity is pretty good too at 804 meters a second. However, these turrets have very terrible angles both to the front and to the rear. So trying to open up all 8 guns on a broadside will put you at a return angle where you can get citadeled. And it's something that is not very good to have on a battleship. The ship, as I will talk about later in the replay, does not have the ability to overmatch its contemporaries at and above its tier. The Aaa Defense on the Vanguard is pretty okay if you do spec it somewhat for an AA build. You do have 3 different 40mm Bofors cannons and then the 133mm, and while the raw numbers combined together are pretty effective, of course, the Bofors, the Mark 6s that have most of your DPM, only have a range of 4.2 kilometers, and that is with advanced firing training on the ship. So the AA is pretty much focused along the medium and the short range. The maneuverability of the ship is fantastic, however, 30 knots with top speed. I believe that's with Sierra Mike. I'm not 100% sure. But you do have a rudder shift time of 9.7 seconds, and that's one of the gimmicks, I suppose, of this ship. It is able to turn in faster than a lot of the cruisers that it is at its matchmaking tier. It does have a rather poor 850 meter turning circle, but then again, for a Tier 8 battleship, that is still pretty good. And this thing does turn on a dime, let me tell you. The concealment, 12.0 kilometers detection by sea, is pretty good for a Tier 8 battleship. There are some that can get a little bit less than that, like the Bismarck and the Tirpitz, but overall 12 kilometers is fantastic for a battleship, and you will be able to outspot some cruisers that exist at Tier 9 and 10, which is a very nice thing to have. Taking a look at the modules, unfortunately, all you have access to is the repair party, but it does act a little bit differently. It's not like the British Mong heals. It's a lot closer to the Warspite. Your HP per second at 516 is a lot better than some of your Tier 8 contemporaries, but also with a premium consumable, the reload time is only 57 seconds. So you do get your heals back quite fast, and that's the other little gimmick that this thing has. Again, it's very Warspite-esque in that regard. Taking a look at the upgrades, main armaments modification 1. Obviously, you only have 8 guns, so you want to keep all of your turrets in working order. It's very, very important. For the second one, damage control system mod 1, obviously reducing your fire and flood chance in a battleship is paramount. For the third one, you're going to need aiming systems mod 1. Even though the guns do have good dispersion and sigma, you're still going to want to be able to land more shells on target. Damage control mod 2 for the 4th slot, because of course reducing the flooding recovery time and fire time. You could put on steering gears mod 2 and get a rudder shift around 8 seconds, which is just quite frankly insane, but I do not recommend that. And then of course concealment systems mod 1 to get that extra bit of concealment so you can get down to that nice 12 kilometer threshold. For the captain skills, pretty standard, at least for the first 4. Preventative maintenance, keeping your modules from becoming incapacitated is nice. Adrenaline Rush is now the one that I go with for number 2 when I have a new battleship captain. Obviously, a 25-second base reload is nice, but you can get that down even further when you do take damage. Superintendent is a must for the third one because you want to get that 5th heal. You're going to need to use all of the hit points that you have access to. And then, of course, Concealment Expert. So, as I've already mentioned a few times, you can get down to that nice 12-kilometer concealment. Now, other follow-on captain skills, advanced firing training is not a bad idea. idea. This is on my Conqueror Captain that I'm using in here, but AFT is pretty good. Basics of survivability, obviously, to continue to decrease the amount of time to repair, extinguish fires, and recover from flooding. Expert Marksman is pretty good because these guns do take quite a long time to turn. With Expert Marksman, it still takes over 31 seconds. And then, of course, Jack of all trades is also a good idea as well, so you can get your heal reload time down even further by another 5%. So I will hit on a few more things about the Vanguard when we do get into the replay, but overall, statistically, it's not a bad battleship, and you can make it work, albeit with some pretty bad weaknesses. So with that being said, let's leave the port and check out a game on Tears of the Desert. Alrighty guys, we're now going to check out this replay. I'm divvied up with my buddies Hashi and Static the Warmonger, and they're playing in the Richelieu and Charles Martel respectively, the Tier 8 French battleship and French heavy cruiser, and we're playing Epicenter here on Tears of the Desert. So, one little quick thing before I hit on a few more points. This is Tier 10 matchmaking, and obviously being at Tier 8, you do get up-tiered quite a bit, even if you are queuing solo. So this is going to be a more accurate representation of what to expect out of this ship. Now, a couple big differences between the Warspite that I do want to point out, because this thing is not a Tier 8 Warspite. Now, I mentioned it in the port very briefly, but these 15-inch guns do not have the ability to overmatch most of their contemporaries at Tier 8 on up. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. They are not able to overmatch very much. And why this is important is because the Warspite at Tier 6 does not have this problem. So comparing the guns to the Warspite in that regard should not happen. This does play differently than that ship does. Obviously, it's the same amount of guns. You have good dispersion, good accuracy. But the inability to be able to punish bow-in ships is a privilege that the Warspite has that the Vanguard does not. So you do not want to be shooting AP exclusively in this thing. However, I will caution you that while the high explosive shells do perform pretty nicely, they're about the same level of performance compared to the Monarch at Tier 8, only having eight guns, will still have you dabbing the 2 key as your predominant ammunition choice in this ship. When, say, something like a Kronstadt or a Yamato does go bow in, it's not a bad idea to dab that 1 key. However, most of the ammo that you should be shooting in this ship should still remain with the AP. You do have good penetration on the guns, but it's all about the overmatch in this game, and not being able to overmatch some of the cruisers and pretty much all of the battleships that you'll be coming across is something that'll take a little bit getting used to. The second thing is that when you combine that with the poor turret angles, it's well past 35 degrees, and the fact that this thing does have an above-water citadel, it cannot eat shit on a broadside like a Warspite can and get away without taking a citadel. I've seen Warspites get citadeled, of course, but those things do have a quasi-turtleback, and they do eat lots of penetration at the expense of not really getting citadeled all that often, whereas the Vanguard cannot say the same. And when you combine that with the terrible turret angles, both going forward and when you're cutting away, this is a ship that should really be staying at the mid to long range. I'd say anywhere between 12 and 18 kilometers, where you're still able to take advantage of your excellent rudder to be able to maneuver, open up your broadside, shoot, and then go back to a more nose-on position. But again, when you compare it to the Warspite, it has a citadel that's a lot easier to reach. It has guns that are not able to lull pen most of the ships that they come across, and it has turret angles that are very un-Warspite-like. So again, comparing it directly to that ship is a mistake, and something that you just really shouldn't be playing this like you would a Warspite. Now, for the purposes of this game, let's take a look how I do in some Tier 10 matchmaking. The very first salvo on the Neptune at 17.5 kilometers unfortunately landed a little bit in front. This guy is changing his speed quite often here. You can see that it appears that he's creeping along at maybe a quarter, maybe half speed. So for this next salvo, I'm going to take a little bit more care. I'm waiting to see if he's going to actually speed up drastically, which he is not. Looks like he's going somewhere between a quarter and half speed. So now I'm going to take a guess here and get the next salvo going down range. And you can see the 804 meters a second shell velocity coming into play. And I get a very monster salvo on that guy. 2 pens, 2 citadels, 31,000 points of damage. And with 11,700 on a citadel, these 15-inch guns are still capable of dealing quite a bit of damage, of course, when you catch something broadside. And while citadeling a Neptune is nothing special, the Vanguard does have, for the most part, pretty good accuracy, as I have mentioned, so you saw that accuracy right there. Now, something a little bit less to be expected, I actually dropped that Montana for 19,200 with 1 citadel and 1 penetration. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting that. The British battleships, much like the cruisers, do have armor-piercing shells that have to penetrate a little bit more armor before they actually arm. Or actually, no, it's the opposite of the British light cruisers. If you guys have noticed playing like Monarch and Lion and Conqueror, you don't get citadels on cruisers and battleships on broadsides as much as you would be accustomed to with other battleships like, say, American or Japanese. So that right there was a little bit lucky, to be honest with you, but it just goes to show that, once again, this is a ship that does have pretty good accuracy, and it does reward very good shooting, quite a bit more so than other battleships that you will be playing in this game. Now right there, a little bit less good dispersion on that next salvo. Unfortunately, I straddled the Montana at about 20 kilometers, but with 2 meaty salvos and the enemy team turned away from the south side, I'm now going to move into a more northwesterly position because you can see that the enemy team has actually pushed the majority of their forces over to that section, that little quadrant of the map. And like I said, medium to long range is where this ship is able to deal a lot more damage, and it's able to play most effectively. Now, another thing that I didn't mention in port is that this ship, like all the other British BBs and the French as well, has 32 millimeters of armor coated all over the place. The bow, the stern, the deck. Obviously, the superstructure isn't 32, but basically this thing is very susceptible to HE spam. And you'd be very surprised how quickly your hit points will get eradicated from nonstop HE. And when you're going up against something like a Worcester, you're going up against something like a Cleveland, you know, that's a very terrifying ship to deal with, and it's one that you really do not want to be getting into a one-on-one fight with. And like I said, you know, the 32 millimeters that coats this ship is definitely a weakness, and that's why you really want to stay at arm's length until the mid to late stage of the game, and you're going to see me do that here in this replay. This is the reason why I decided to select this one for you guys to see. Now, another thing, the Torpedo Belt, only 25%. It's not very good. British battleships as a whole don't really have good torpedo protection for that matter, but this thing will take massive damage from torpedoes, specifically Japanese torpedoes, so I'd be very careful when there are enemy destroyers afoot. There is an Akazuki around here, but I'm going to try to maneuver around and, again, stay far enough away where he's going to have to close the distance to use his torpedoes. Another big meaty salvo here on the Worcester, double citadel. I think at least 26,000 damage. That was an absolutely good one. Right into the side of that American cruiser. And for an American light cruiser that is very difficult to citadel due to the very low lining, top part of the innards of the ship, that was actually pretty good. Now you're going to see here the next salvo going down range. Unfortunately, I aimed a little bit too far to the right. The Worcester does angle away, and he does dodge my salvo. But like I said, I'm playing safe. I moved into a more central location to try and get some shots on those enemy ships that are over there, but obviously there was the Akazuki that's now just getting spotted yet again, so I decided that, you know, safety is the most prudent play, and I was going to turn away and reposition myself once again. And staying this far back from the enemies it's really not a bad idea. If anyone's going to complain about a Vanguard sitting more in the mid to, you know, long range ranges for its guns, you know, don't listen to those people. This is a battleship that excels at that medium range. And here, 15 kilometers. This is probably a very good, perfect example right here. You're still going to be able to get good dispersion on your shots. Shells going down range at the Musashi. Unfortunately, I do get a little crummy accuracy right there. Only one penetration. I did not manage to get the frag on him. However, I'm up to 90,000 points of damage, and I have put 3 big-time hits into the Montana, the Neptune, and the Worcester, respectively. So now with the enemy team pushed back pretty much exclusively to the west of the 5 line, I'm now going to move in and still stay at that medium range, but I want to get a little bit closer because you can tell that this is our game to lose. We've only lost 2. The enemy team has lost 4. We have over 100 points of a lead, and the only capture zone that they have is being contested by our friendly Shimakaze. Now I am going to try to swerve my guns into play on the Akazuki. You can see right there the rudder shift, being able to get those turrets on the front, facing forward very, very quickly. But you can see right there, a little bit crappy dispersion. I'm not going to get any shells to hit on that one. But obviously I'm worried about the potential torpedoes that the Akazuki has, 10 kilometers of range, so I'm going to actually turn to the right here, and I'm going to get behind this island. But if you've noticed throughout the replay just how fluently and effortlessly that this thing is able to turn and just be able to maneuver around. And there's something to be said for a really good rudder shift. I know that it's better to have a better turning circle, but having this rudder shift is pretty nice at the end of the day. Now, there's only 2 enemy destroyers left. However, that Z-46 does not have much more time to live. I think he's going to be dying here any second now. I unfortunately aim a little bit too far forward on the Kutuzov. I think he went into his smoke screen right there. So, unfortunately, all the shells land just a little bit to his starboard side short. But that's okay. Now, the Sakazuki is actually doubled back, and he's only 7.5 kilometers away from me, so I am going to start accelerating here. However, my guns are reloaded, and you're going to see here once again at these short ranges, or at the ranges that this thing is able to deal a lot of damage at, the accuracy for the most part is pretty good. Unfortunately, only 6 over penetrations there on that guy, but I still dunked him for over 10,000 points of damage. Now you're going to see here as I'm speeding up, once again, I'm going to be able to use the rudder shift to just maneuver around. The micro maneuvering, that is a very important skill for good players to know and understand. Just being able to, not run into islands, put your ship where it's supposed to be. It's very paramount. And this is something that the Vanguard can do very well. Now, another pretty good salvo right there on the Amagi, about 9,000 points of damage with 2 pens and 1 over penetration. I'm up to about 110,000 points of damage, which is pretty good. If I were to die right now, this is a healthy number for damage to have in this ship. It's 540 to 283. The enemy team only has 5 ships remaining, while we've only lost 3. And now, since I have enough hit points to work with, I'm still at about 60k here. I'm actually going to maneuver in. I'm going to get my guns pointing to the starboard side after I get this next salvo off, because I want to be able to utilize my firepower against the enemy Worcester. Unfortunately, only 1 penetration there on the Amagi. You can see that the Worcester is actually shooting quite a bit at the friendly Yamato that is pushing in. So while those guys are kind of distracted, I'm going to swing my guns, like I said, to the starboard side, and I'm going to try to get them to bear here on the second enemy Worcester that's over there at 11.4 kilometers. The first set of shells are going out. 2 of them look fantastic. Unfortunately, just a little bit too high with 2 over penetrations. But you're going to see right here, as the Worcester decides to focus on me here, this one salvo that hits me does over 4,000 damage, and there were actually quite a few shells that hit the side of the armor, but it just goes to show you how having 32 millimeters all over the place is just not good. You just eat so much damage from light cruisers specifically that have the DPM to be able to really put the hurting on you. The Kutuzov is slowing down. Another good salvo on a ship that is not moving anywhere close to full speed, and all I need is 1 Citadel to get the kill, and that's exactly what I do as I pick off that Tier 8 premium Soviet light cruiser. And now with my guns pointed towards starboard, I am going to be shooting here at the enemy Worcester. And this is one of the few ships at Tier 8 and up that you are able to deal damage to somewhat consistently, even when they are angled away. You're going to see right here, very awesome dispersion as I get a whole bunch of shells to land right on top of him. 2 pens, 2 over penetrations. I do pick up Confederate as I dealt almost 9,000 points of damage. So that was a pretty nice meaty hit on that guy right there. I'm continuing to charge down the enemy Montana. However, it appears that somebody else is going to be able to get the kill on him, so I'm going to continue to focus here on the Worcester. The next salvo going down range at the running away target, and you're going to see still a few more good shells land right on target. 4 pens for about 6,000 damage. Unfortunately, he is saturated, so I had some half penetrations right there, but nonetheless, still consistent shell performance against the Worcester. And now I have about 3 seconds left on the next reload. He's down to 9,800 hit points. He is angled away to me pretty nicely, so I decided to hold my fire just for a split second as he did not continue his full turn to the right, and the next salvo is going down range. The shell has fallen on the target, and I do manage to get the Citadel and finish the game with that frag. Alrighty guys, taking a look now at the post-battle results. 917,000 credits received and 5,400 total experience earned. This was not my first win of the day. I picked up 1 medal, Confederate, dealing 152,900 points of damage off of 38 shell hits and 7 citadels. I sank 2 enemy boats and had 1 cheeky secondary hit. Taking a look at the team score, oh yeah, 2,400 flat base XP. That is a very good score in a Tier 10 matchup. Static came in 3rd with 2 frags of his own and 1507. and then rip Hashi, but that's okay. He still had 1 frag to his name. Taking a look at the detailed report, you can see all the damage was dealt with the armor piercing at 152. Like I said earlier in the replay, it is okay to dab that 1 key and spam high explosive because you still do have the nice penetration and the pretty good fire chance, but with only 8 guns, it does sometimes become a liability because when accuracy does not favor you, or shall I say when dispersion doesn't favor you, you don't have a very good volume of fire. And it does sometimes bite you in the butt when you're using it. However, just looking at the damage that I was able to deal, sure, I did catch quite a few cruisers broadside, but you saw at the very end the Worcester eating damage when he was angled away nicely, and the Montana eating 19k at very long range. So overall, the Vanguard, it is a battleship that has a lot good going for it. However, those 3 critical weaknesses that I talked about, the Citadel, the turret angles, and the inability to be able to overmatch most of its contemporaries at Tier 8 and up, keeps this thing from being considered one of the best Tier 8 battleships. And for a new player out there, I probably would not recommend this ship based off of those 3 things alone. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the review and commentary. I know that this isn't as long as my normal ones, but with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great day.